to the great displeasure of dermatologists who have initiated an awareness campaign to warn about this loss of identity and its dangerous health consequences. According to the Cameroonian Society of Dermatology, SOCODERM, Douala is the place where one meets the most practitioners of skin depigmentation, Jansong in local language. According to SOCODERM, in 2019, 27.8% of the population of the country's second largest city is affected, based on a sample of 10,000 men and women aged between 15 and 50. Next in order, the cities of Kumba in southwest, where 24.1% of the population lighten their skin, Yaoundé, the capital, 19.6% are followers of ginseng, Kribi in south, 11.1%, and Bagante in the west, 10.3% of candidates for skin depigmentation. We coat ourselves with everything disregarding the risks incurred in terms of health, such as skin cancers, says the associate professor of dermatology, before adding that it's not surprising to see a man or a woman with black feet or hands while the face is almost mixed. If the fault is to be attributed to the noisy advertisement of the cosmetics industry, as well as to the followers of ginseng, people who have a complex about their black skin, the fact remains that according to Dr. Odile Ngoro, dermatologist, infectiologist, some pharmacists are not exempt from reproach. In fact, according to Dr. Odile Ngoro, some doctors acting in complicity with pharmacists prescribe to people prescription containing glutathione, a skin lightening product, sold at 250 francs CFA per box.
Away from that, crossing over to South Africa. South Africa's green future has become a cause for worry in the Mpumalanga belt. Coal is a bedrock of South Africa's economy, employing almost 100,000 people and accounting for 80% of electricity production. But the sector's future is uncertain as Africa's most industrialized economy looks to win itself off the carbon-emitting fuel in line with global efforts to tackle climate change.
Workers kitted in soiled yellow overalls breathe in the hazy air as they wait to board trucks that will drive them to an underground shaft. They are readying themselves for a 12-hour shift, huddled under a carport shelter to avoid the scorching sun. There are more than 100 coal mines and a dozen coal-fired plants that dot the industrial landscape of the northeastern province of Mpumalanga, an area known as South Africa's coal belt. It's sad because there is a lot of mines and they hire a lot of people. If they were to close, a lot of people would struggle. So the mines are very important in our lives, especially coal, because we even make fires with them. They do a lot of work actually. Coal is a bedrock of South Africa's economy, employing almost 100,000 people and accounting for 80% of electricity production. But the future is uncertain.
I'm aware that the Seriti Green has been established a few months back, and then we are in support of that because we need to diversify as an organization in line with what might be coming in the near future and to benchmark ourselves with international standards.
So as to win itself off the carbon-emitting fuel in line with global efforts to tackle climate change, the government last year secured $8.5 billion in loans and grants to finance the transition to greener alternatives.
So I think we can run a dual system, coal and green energy, which will increase capacity, because what we've seen is that we lack in capacity with the amount of load shedding we are having. Also, with the reserves that are still in the country, there's still a lot of reserves that need to be obviously mined out and then burnt for electricity. So I think a dual approach will be more effective than cutting out coal totally.
Recent studies suggest more jobs will be created than lost by going green, but analysts say the swap will not be painless. The coal industry is concentrated in Mpumalanga, which accounts for about 80% of all coal production.
A 3-week lockdown has been declared in 2 districts of Uganda as the country battles an Ebola outbreak. The President Yoweri Museveni had already ordered police to arrest anyone suspected of having the virus who refused to isolate. And he has also forbidden traditional healers from trying to handle cases. In previous outbreaks, healers have been associated with hotspots for the spread of the virus. We have more for you on that.
Bars, nightclubs, places of worship and entertainment venues will be closed in Mubembe and neighboring Kasanda, and a curfew will come into force. The move is a U-turn for Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni, who previously said there was no need for such measures. This latest outbreak has killed 19 people among 58 recorded cases. However, the real number of deaths and cases may be higher. The outbreak began in early September in Mubembe, about 50 miles from the capital Kampala, and has remained the epicenter. President Museveni had previously ruled out lockdowns, saying Ebola was not an airborne virus, so did not require the same measures as COVID-19. But on Saturday, he halted all movement in and out of Mubembe and Kasanda district for 21 days. Cargo trucks will be allowed to enter and leave the areas, but all other transport will be stopped. These are temporary measures to control the spread of Ebola, he said in a televised address. We should all cooperate with authorities so we bring this outbreak to an end in the shortest possible time. The president had already ordered police to arrest anyone suspected of having the virus who refused to isolate, and he has forbidden traditional healers from trying to handle cases. In previous outbreaks, healers have been associated with hotspots for spread of the virus. The first recorded death in this outbreak was a 24-year-old man in Mubembe. 6 members of his family also died. It later reached the capital Kampala with 1 death recorded in October, but health officials said the city remained virus-free as the man who died had traveled from Mubembe. This latest outbreak is of the Sudan strain of the virus, for which there is no approved vaccine. The Zaire strain, which killed 11,000 people in an outbreak across West Africa from 2013 to 2016, can be vaccinated against. Ebola spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids or contaminated material. Symptoms include vomiting, diarrhea, and in some cases, internal or external bleeding. The incubation period can last for 2 days or 3 weeks, and the virus can be associated with other illnesses such as malaria and typhoid.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, rebels kill, rape, and burn down villages. The Mai Mai Yakutumba rebels show no mercy to those they see as their enemies. Women, children, the elderly. That makes no difference to them when they attack. They are powerful armed groups which controls lucrative gold mines in the eastern DRC. We have more information for you on that.
This gold may gleam brightly, but it is stained red with blood. People likely died for this precious metal, destined for the rich world's finest jewelries. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has some of the purest gold in the world, but experts say almost all of it is smuggled out of the country illegally. That often means links to armed groups and human rights abuses. It all starts here, in suffocatingly hot tunnels that hit up to 40 degrees Celsius. Young men scrape out the gold-bearing rock. They earn barely enough to survive on. For fear of reprisals, this man wants to remain anonymous.
When you go to work, you just pray to God because we're feeling like it's a death sentence.
Often it is when the mines cave in. 6 years ago, more than 20 people were buried alive.
I was there with my 3 brothers and other miners. All of them were trapped inside the mine. Even now, their bodies are still inside. I was sad, really down. But I can't be sad for long. I have to earn a living.
And on top of that, this mine is controlled by an armed group, the Mai Mai Yakutumba, according to a recent UN report. The rebels demand what they call taxes from each worker.
They beat me up with an iron rod because I couldn't pay their tax. They threw me into a mud hole for days with no food, I was imprisoned there with 6 other people.
He lost 10 kilograms, he says. Other miners tell us similar stories. They say the Mai Mai are never far. Even now they're hiding further up the mountain because they were informed we were coming. This is the first time journalists have accessed this mine. Both the Mai Mai Yakutumba and local government officials declined our interview requests. It's widely known that the rebels often work together with local authorities and even share profits with them. But with the money they also finance brutal attacks on an ethnic group who they see as their main enemy. The Mai Mai claim the Banyamulenge don't belong to the DRC, so they burn down their villages, rape and kill scores of people. Esther Nanduhura survived one of these attacks.
They found us at the place where we had sought refuge and they killed 3 people. Then they murdered my father-in-law and injured my mother-in-law.
Both of them were over 80, she says. She and her family were forced to march for days with no food. Then they took her husband. She never saw him again. Later she learned he was hacked to death with a machete. They killed dozens, displaced hundreds. Now Esther is safe, sheltering at a friend's house. Rebel control of the mines means conflict gold. But that's not deterring this businessman. The purity of the precious metal has convinced him. Soon he plans to open the first gold refinery in the country and export from DRC to Europe and America.
At the moment, we're discussing a lot with the government. They will check all artisans who are coming to work here. They will try and trace how it's going on, and maybe it will help. I hope it will help.
But ensuring authenticity will be difficult. Traders tell us they fake certificates to hide the real origin of the gold. Esther Nanduhura can only appeal for an end to the trade in blood gold.
I hear the Mai Mai sell gold to white people to buy weapons. That's why they sell the gold. I want to tell these white people to stop buying from them, so they don't kill us with these weapons.
For Esther, it is a simple equation. As long as armed groups can reap profits from gold mining, they will keep earning the cash to kill.
Moving on from that, in Abidjan on Monday, former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo celebrated his first anniversary of his political group, Africa's People's Party, Côte d'Ivoire. On the occasion, he talked domestic affairs and the diplomatic role between Ivory Coast and Mali. We have the report.
In Abidjan on Monday, former Ivorian President Laurent Gbagbo celebrated his first anniversary of his political group, Africa's People's Party, Côte d'Ivoire. During a conference marking the occasion, the 77-year-old made the first official comment on the detention of 46 Ivorian soldiers in Mali. They were arrested upon arrival in Bamako on July 10th and were accused of being mercenaries. The leader of the PPA party called on Togolese president who mediates the crisis to redouble his efforts to help solve the diplomatic role.
President Assimi Goïta should be asked to think about his brotherhood of arms with those who are in prison there.
During the conference, eyes were also set on domestic politics and the 2025 presidential race. If Gbagbo has not officially announced his bid for the executive secretary, it's an obvious fact.
Concerning the 2025 elections, President Laurent Gbagbo is a natural candidate.
President Alassane Ouattara has led the country since 2010. In addition to Gbagbo's party, the Ivorian opposition parties include the PDCI by former leader Henry Konan Bédié and the MGC by former First Lady Simone Gbagbo.
On the global scene, the African Union on Sunday called for an immediate ceasefire in Tigray, where violence is escalating. This happened in response to the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPF, rebels, and they said they were ready to respect a ceasefire. More information in the following report.
The African Union on Sunday called for an immediate ceasefire in Tigray, where violence is escalating. with rebels in the northern Ethiopian region saying they were ready to respect it. The town of Shire in northwestern Tigray has been bombed for several days in a joint offensive by Ethiopian and Eritrean troops against Tigrayan rebels that has resulted in several civilian casualties. A member of the International Rescue Committee, an NGO providing disaster relief, was killed and another wounded in one of these attacks on Friday, which left 2 other civilians dead, according to the IRC. After the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed concern about the escalating violence, AU Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed called for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. In response, the Tigray People's Liberation Front rebels said they were ready to respect such a pause in the fighting. Shortly before, the United States Department of State's Africa Desk had said on Twitter that the priority was to achieve an immediate ceasefire of hostilities.
Aid organizations and the United Nations are calling for urgent famine relief in East Africa as the people of Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia confront their worst drought in 40 years. Oxfam says food shortages are likely to cause one death every 36 seconds until the end of the year, while the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says help is needed now.
Aid organizations and the United Nations are calling for urgent famine release in East Africa as the people of Kenya, Somalia, and Ethiopia confront their worst drought in 40 years. Oxfam says food shortages are likely to cause one death every 36 seconds until the end of the year, while the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says help is needed now. 4 successive seasons of poor rainfall have caused livestock to die and crops to fail, with rural populations in hard-to-reach areas of Somalia the hardest hit. According to Etienne Peter-Schmidt, the current drought is the worst that has been seen in the last 4 decades.
We should not wait for a famine declaration to act, because then it will be too late. We know from 2011, when we faced a famine situation and a famine declaration, that by the time the famine was declared, half of the 260,000 people who died had actually already died. The current drought is the worst that we have seen in the last 4 decades. It has affected about 7.8 million people. So that just to put things in perspective, this is about half of Somalia's population. 90% of the country is facing extreme drought.
High food prices caused by the war in Ukraine have exacerbated the situation, while food instability is often linked to an increase in gender-based violence. The alert coincides with the United Nations World Food Day. Away from that, Nigeria's available power generation capacity fell by 981.8 megawatts between 2015 and August 2020, despite over 1.51 trillion naira intervention of the sector by the federal government since the current administration came on board in 2015. This came as the national grid collapsed 98 times under the regime of President Major General Muhammadu Buhari. More information in the following commentary. Nigeria's available power generation capacity fell by 981.8 megawatts between 2015 and August 2022, despite the over 1.51 trillion naira intervention in the sector by the federal government of Nigeria since the current administration came on board in 2015. This came as the national grid collapsed 98 times under the regime of the President of Nigeria, Major General Muhammadu Buhari. It was also gathered that the total power generation capacity loss for the sector between 2015 and August 2022 rose to 1.76 trillion naira as operators and experts decried the sorry state of the industry since it was unbundled in November 2013. Although further analysis of the document showed that the available generation capacity fluctuated between 2015 and 2022, data from the report indicated that the quantum of available generation in Nigeria was not impressive, particularly since last year. It must be noted that the available generation capacity is different from the average utilization generation, as the latter is constantly lower than the former. In fact, data from the document indicated that Nigerians' average utilized generation during the review period hovered between 3,600 megawatts and 4,180 megawatts, which were, of course, lower than the least available generation capacity of 5,634.47 megawatts recorded between January and August this year. The federal government of Nigeria, aside from its annual budgetary allocation to the Federal Ministry of Power, undertook a series of interventions in the power sector in a bid to revamp the industry. This, however, was despite the fact that the distribution and generation arms of the business were unbundled and officially sold to private investors in November 2013. Meanwhile, data sourced from the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission indicated the country's power grid had been recording incessant partial and total collapse since 2015, despite the funds pumped into the sector. Figures from the commission showed that grid collapse cases in 2015 were 10. In 2016, it rose to 28, while 21 cases were recorded in 2017. The power sector regulator outlined the number of grid collapse cases in Nigeria in 2018, 2019, 2020 and 2021 as 13, 11, 4 and 4. In July 2020, on the 20th of July 2022, Nigeria's power grid saw the 6th collapse in 2022, while on the 13th of June, it was reported that the grid collapsed. Nigeria's power system collapsed twice in March and twice again in April in the year 2022. Sadly, power generation on the grid has continued to fluctuate due to various concerns such as gas constraints, water management challenges, and gas pipeline vandalism, among others.
A major fire broke out on Saturday at Iran's notorious Evin prison, known for housing political prisoners, journalists, and foreign nationals. Dramatic footage of the fire and smoke was first posted on social media on Saturday evening.
Video shared online showed flames and smoke at the site in Tehran, and gunshots and explosions could be heard. An official quoted by state media said the situation was under control, but video footage appeared to show the fire continued after this. Iran has been gripped for weeks by anti-government protests. They first erupted last month after the death of 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian Masha Amini in police custody. Officials said she died of a heart attack, but her family disputed this, saying she was beaten by morality police. But this could easily be the case. State media has suggested the two are not linked, quoting an official who blamed criminal element for the fire. 8 people were injured. State-controlled outlet IRNA said, speaking from inside the prison. Tehran governor told State TV that there was a riot in a ring of the prison housing petty criminals, and the situation was now completely calm. Dramatic footage of the fire and smoke was first posted on social media on Saturday evening. Gunshots and explosions were audible in several videos, and in others, people could be heard outside the prison chanting "Death," one of the main slogans of the anti-government protest movement. One video appeared to show objects fired into the prison from outside its perimeters, followed by the sound of an explosion. Large crowds gathered outside the prison, traffic came to stand still, and riot police were seen entering the facility. Even after Iranian media claimed that calm had been restored, the situation at the prison was still confused. Videos continued to appear on social media showing the fire still burning and the sound of gunshots. Other pictures showed inmates on the roof of a section of the prison where political prisoners and many of the protesters who have been arrested in the past 4 weeks are kept. However, later some prisoners were able to reach out to their families to tell them that they are safe.
Now, for more information and stories across the African continent, we head into the African Newspaper Review. We'll be right back. Also, the 1 p.m. English news on Golfe TV Africa, and I'm with my colleague Hazel OGOIGBE. How are you?
Very fine, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Okwe. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you. Are you ready to dissect?
Well, good to go, born ready.
All right, we start off our papers from the local territory as we touch on Le Matinal. The front page of the Le Matinal reveals about the project, the BRIC project, the inundation, and as the Benin signs an accord of $130 billion. Also, the dissolution of l'Agence Benin Press, the dissolution of Benin Press, talking about moving on from that, anyway, l'heure de vérité de l'UP. Now, still moving into the legislative elections, it is time for truth for the UP party. We have this in relevance to the legislative elections that will debut on January 2023. Moving on from that, we head to the next paper of the edition. The front page of this edition reveals le marché financier africain, talking about the financial markets in Africa, the most developed in 2022. We have just right there on the page. Moving on from the Institute, we head to the next paper of the edition as we touch on the Daily Guide Ghana. The front page of the Daily Guide Ghana reveals Agrada gets bill, he had cage, we have that on page 6, NDC won't stop Galamsey. We have that on page 7. I wouldn't sack Aforiata, Akufo-Addo has revealed. If you want to find out why he's not going to sack Akufo-Addo, you can get that on page 3 of the Daily Guide Ghana. Also, burn small-scale mining now, Christian Council. We have it on page 3 of the Daily Guide as well. Moving on from that, we head to the Nation Nigeria. The front page of the Nation Nigeria reveals my plans for prosperous united Nigeria by Tinubu, ruling party standard bearer unfolds blueprint for out-of-school children, and why not should vote APC candidates by El Hufai. Tinubu says he has a plan for a prosperous Nigeria. You believe that? Do you think maybe it's all about age and that he has gotten wiser over time? Because I remember when he was governor of Lagos State, I don't think Lagos was as prosperous as it was on the Fashola, because Lagos really blew up on the Fashola. And for Tinubu, after 8 years, governor of Lagos State, I don't think he contributed anything significant to the state.
Well, basically, Tinubu actually did a whole lot when it comes to development of Lagos State.
He did?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
There was a whole lot of development, there was a whole lot of growth. But that's not even the point. The point, Nigerians that are not voting or campaigning for Tinubu, is that he is not physically agile. You know, when you listen to him speak, he spurs out his words. Like he goes like, and then he comes back to the conversation. You know, we need a leader that can represent us perfectly on the international scene. The Ghanaians might say Nana Akufo-Addo might not be, you know, he might have led the country into a very large depth. But the fact is, when President Nana Akufo-Addo is speaking, you see this prowess. You see somebody that is gifted, that has the gift of the gab. When President Patrice Talon is speaking, you know, you see the way he carries himself, you see the way he talks, you see the way he passes across his message. A leader should be charismatic. That's one of the characteristics of a good leader. So this is what now some Nigerians, the youth, are talking about, that Tinubu doesn't really have that charisma. You know, his health is really not strong enough to be able to handle a country with complex nationalities, various indigenous personalities as Nigeria.
Do you think it's probably? Do you think there's a probability that he might be ruling by proxy? That he might be being ruled by proxy, as Tinubu as proxy, and the real ruler behind Tinubu.
That is
or
also
as a group of people.
Yeah, that is also.
And because, you know, okay, we can use his face to win, get the ticket.
That is also another school of thought that was propounded by some people, saying that it would actually be his vice presidential candidate Chutima that would be calling the shots, but he's just going to be there. You know, so everything is just speculation, nothing authentic, nothing real.
All right, still on the Nation Nigeria, it says Buhari now saying my administration's scorecard by Buhari. Now let me read a little bit on that. President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday presented the scorecard of his administration, saying his high-impact projects meet the yearnings and expectations of Nigerians. He said the level of progress made in the implementation of his 9-priority agenda had remarkably impacted sectors like power, communications, digital economy, oil and gas, national security, anti-graft war, social investments, health, and agriculture. The president spoke during the opening of... He also talked about the Air Force, military, and said that before the end of his campaign, they will have additional 36 fighter jets. Now, let me just go back to lining up some. He said he spoke on power. The power, just real quick question and answers. Do you, in your opinion, the power improve in Nigeria?
The power did not improve in Nigeria. The Nigeria power grid has broken down 98 times, according to Punch reports, in the past since 2015.
Would you say communications? Is there any big deal in communications?
Well, communication, I would even say rather there was a clampdown on communication, because during his regime, Twitter was banned and a whole lot of things were really banned.
All right, digital economy.
Well, digital economy, I don't have the statistics.
Okay, I'll add this to you. Cryptocurrency was something that financed a lot of Nigerians
through. And it was banned during Buhari's tenure.
So I wouldn't call that a score. I wouldn't call that a pass in his scorecard. Also, oil and gas. We still don't have a refinery.
We don't have a refinery, and then the price of fuel is going up day by day.
Taking up subsidy.
And then, of course, recently there was a revelation of illegal bunkering. It happened in River State. It also happened in Delta State. That has been happening. Like a tanker was intercepted in Equatorial Guinea, and then the government. We now asked ourselves that, how did this tank as large as this, how did it leave the shores of Nigeria? So apparently, you find out that there are a whole lot of checks and balances on the sea.
And so you
know that the people doing this are in the system.
Because you can't tell me that a large tanker like that moved without the Nigerian Navy.
Exactly, and you cannot even say that the...
It's not a submarine.
Exactly, and then you can't even talk about the fact that the Navy in Nigeria, the Navy in Equatorial Guinea is more equipped than the Navy in Nigeria. Are you kidding me, really?
Impossible. This is the 4th best military on the continent. All right, also, Air Force. Okay, I wouldn't say much about the Air Force, because if you say you add planes, that's fine, that's good. But what is the impact of, how has that affected the insecurity, positively affected the insecurity
that is the question.
In the northern region? We're still having a lot of kidnapping.
Lots of children are behind bars. And then the educational system, which he'd even talk about. The educational system, I keep saying it, the education is the foundation of the development of any country. Talk about the United States of America, talk about Canada, talk about any single country that pays attention to education. That is a country that is on its way to development. Now, children have been at home for the past 8 months. They just called off the strike. And the thing about the strike is they literally forced them to resume school, because they took them to court and they gave a decree saying that they should resume school. But the fact is, the problems still abound. Rather than meeting them at the point of their needs, or rather than listening to them and providing what they want, they rather use force. And how do you expect a lecturer that has been on strike for the past 8 months fighting for a noble cause, the government forces you to go to school? Imagine if you're the student and I'm the lecturer. I would not even teach you. I would fail you because I will not be happy, I'll be discontent, and I will not be effective. And at the end of the day, the kind of graduates you bring out be graduates that are half-baked. So it's really terrible.
This is already a scenario. This is already a scenario that has played on and on and on in Nigeria for years. About the kind of graduates that come out from Nigerian universities. So all in all, I feel, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I might be wrong, I feel if you're going to score, I feel if an administration is supposed to be scored, it should not be scored by the president. It
should be scored by the populace.
By the populace, because this is just a biased opinion from the Buhari administration.
Let me just say something on the educational system in Nigeria. You find out that Nigerian graduates are sound, and this is because Nigerian students in federal universities decided to go take the extra mile and develop themselves. Like when the lecturer does this or he does that, or he doesn't come to class or doesn't teach you so well, the onus lies on you, because you know where you're coming from, you know where you're studying, you go the extra mile, you read in the night, you go to the library. So at the end of the day, if you're having graduates that are sound, you find out it's not really because of the lecturers, it's because they decided to burn the candle at night.
As a result of their own efforts to search for knowledge. All right, also 2023 INEC, page 6, INEC chair not under pressure to quit. Now I have a question. It's more of a thought. I believe, the Independent Electoral Commission, Nigerian Electoral Commission, this commission is subservient to the federal government.
Yes, apolitical. Apolitical, like they don't belong to anyone.
They say they don't belong to anyone, but they are under the federal government. And who picks the INEC chairman?
Well,
they have the current administration in charge. So the current administration in charge picks the INEC chairman, and you expect him to be neutral? That's my question. And this is not just in Nigeria. This is, as a result, it is in Benin Republic. It's in every electoral commission. The chairperson of the electoral commission has been selected by the government in charge. Now, if I'm a government in charge and I pick a person, do you not expect that person to be a little bit biased and supportive of me?
Definitely, he'll be biased. There's a probability that he'll be biased and supportive of you. But Nigeria is getting to a point whereby the vote of the people is going to count, and the people are going to monitor the process.
So that's why because of the electric
ballot system. Yeah. You know, from the period where votes are casted at the polling center, it's transmitted to INEC, and then it's definitely going to be shown on a large board. So you find out that the electorate and the people, the citizens, will actually be able to follow the results without any cutting corners.
All right, let's hope for that, because, you know, I feel electronic systems like this are subject to hacking. Oh. It could happen. We don't know the firewalls put in place to disprove the fact that it cannot be hacked. But let's hope for the best and hope Nigerians' votes will count.
Exactly.
All right, moving on from that, we head to the next paper of the edition as we touch on the New Vision. The front page of the New Vision reveals, page 3, President rallies Africans for unity. Museveni opens up on succession, Mao and Muhoozi. Opening up to succession, I hope Bobby Wine is being taken into regard right here. Also, the Ebola updates, we have that on the right page of it. 5 more succumb to virus, 40 contacts traced in Kibuki, 5 arrested as lockdown bites, police impound 225 vehicles, Mubonde MPs complain, and we have that also on page 4 and page 27 of the New Vision Uganda. Moving on from that, we head now to the Punch. The front page of the Punch reveals Tinubu Ogbofile economic restructuring agenda to the North. APC LP candidates speak on restructuring corruption, agriculture, and power in Nigeria. Atiku Saraki party members fume as thugs attack PDP Kaduna and says Zamfara rallies. Also, ministerial retreats. Buhari backs Nigeria Air. OC Banjo laments Forex woes. We have that on page 8. Also, tuition hike. Protesting in Ogun police students to stop exams and demand reversals of the tuition hike. Also, police arrest Lagos Peace Band over his wife's vet. We have that on page 4 and 5. I mean, if your wife dies, and I mean, if he's been arrested, it should be as a result of the
domestic violence,
of the results, the posthumous results.
Yes, because she was a victim of domestic violence. She had actually been suffering in silence while the husband beat her.
All right, then it's understandable him being the first suspect. Now, inflation hits 20.77% as food supply and FX crisis worsens. We have that on page 27 on the Punch Nigeria. Nigeria's debt risky and unsustainable. Nigeria is currently on Nigeria's on $37.9 billion of debt, and Buhari has come out to say his scorecard is. This is why I just think it's very delusional of him. Moving on from that, Clark's asked Buhari to release Kanu and Knox Malami. We have it on page 14. Immigration probes personnel over extortion at Lagos Airport. We have that on page 35. 31 policemen dismissed for misconduct in 18 months. In 18 months, 31 policemen, and that I still feel that number might be lower than the actual number is. All right, moving on from that, we conclude this edition of the African newspaper as our time has come to an end. Hazel, over to you.
Thank you so much, Metokwe ADOGLO, for the newspaper review. And of course, to end this news edition, here's a recap of our top stories. Residents in the once peaceful towns bordering Benin and Niger fear a growing threat of violence from the Islamic State in the West African group.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, rebels kill, rape, and burn villages.
Aid organizations and the United Nations are calling for urgent famine release in Africa. And our dear viewers, this is where we conclude today's news edition, coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV Africa. Here in the city of Cotonou, I am Hazel OGOIGBE.
And I'm Metokwe ADOGLO, and do have yourself a lovely day.